speaker for this evening, Dr. Sheikh Mehdi Hazari, who I mentioned before, is just a super good guy. Professionally, he has a doctorate from Johns Hopkins University. He's a physiologist and environmental scientist by profession, specializing in neuro and cardiovascular physiology, and he studies the effect of air pollution on human health, things that I would never talk about over here because I have no idea, but we're here to learn, inshallah. In addition, he has completed his Hawza studies under the direction of Sheikh Muhammad al-Halabi, and he is one of the board members at the Imam Mehdi Association of Marja'iyya. Dr. Sheikh, if you don't mind. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So I'm not even going to get started with him. I mean, you see the hair, the jacket. I'm definitely older and grayer, although not wiser for sure than him. But I want to. You like how I'm just calling him him? Yeah. That's the sort of relationship we have. You know, when you've been married for like 30 years, him and her, that's how you call each other. I want to thank Dr. Sheikh for having me at the Sacred Door, for Melanie for coordinating everything, and for the Islamic Center of NYU. This is a real honor and privilege, and although he's really talked me up, I'm doomed to failure now. Your expectations were way too high. But I think what I would like to do is piggyback onto what he just described about shifting perspectives. And I think that's really an amazing phrase and something that really we should consider in our day-to-day lives. And the beauty of Islam and the Holy Quran, if you look at it, is exactly that. It's not perspectives on dogma or on the tenets of faith or on the fundamentals of what God wants you to believe in and practice, but shifting perspectives in which the way the world functions, the way people interact with each other, which today is very different from what it was even 5 or 10 years ago. Very different from when I was your age, which I'm not even going to tell you how long ago that was. There was no internet at that time. There were no cell phones at that time. There was nothing. So the world has changed greatly. So my topic's fairly broad, and I'm going to try to touch on it in a couple of ways. Let me begin by first describing to you one verse of the Holy Quran, in which when God was presenting humanity, Adam alayhi salam, Prophet Adam, to the angels, who were really the only creation at that time, he basically said, I'm making a deputy in the earth. And the angels, who've been worshipping for thousands of years, amongst them is Iblis, Shaitan, who's been worshipping for thousands of years. They come forward, and as the verse of the Quran says, they ask God, they say, أَتَجْعَلْ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدْ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكَ الدِّمَاءِ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. They say that, oh Allah, are you going to make some creature in the earth that is going to do facade, that's going to spread corruption and spill blood, and we are here extolling you, we're praising you. Some of them remain in prostration their entire existence, some remain bowing in their existence, constantly praising God. What is there a need to create this creation that's going to essentially just ruin things? And the word facade is used. The word facade, which is used in the Holy Quran in several different places, essentially means that you take something of value and you corrupt it. All right, so let me give you an example. Let's say Sheikh Doctor over there. See, now I'm no longer referring to him as he. Sheikh Doctor Fayyad, one day he comes to me. He's got his really nice polo shirt. Do you wear a polo? Sometimes. He wears his polo sweatpants or sweatshirt. In this case, you'll understand the story. He brings his polo sweatshirt, and he's like, "I'm going away. Can you please watch my prized polo sweatshirt?" All right, it's important to him. And he says to me, "I love you so much that you can even wear it, but I do want it back at the end of it." All right, I'm like, "Yeah, you're my brother for sure. He gives me his prized Polo sweatshirt. He's like, I'm going to be gone for a month. Just watch it for me. He goes away. I take the sweatshirt. I'm trying to take care of it. Make sure that it's clean and a nice place where it's not going to get sort of, being Indian, Pakistani, there's lots of spices in the house smells, it even permeates into the walls. Trying to keep it away from that. Then I decide it's really cold one day, I'm like, let me wear it. I put it on. Man, it's a Polo sweatshirt, so it feels real good, right? Very comfortable. And I'm sitting there, and the next day I do the same thing. It was so comfortable, I keep wearing it. And as I'm wearing it, I drink chai, I drink tea, I'm sitting there on my couch, and I spill a little bit on his Polo sweatshirt. It happens to be like a cream-colored white sweatshirt, so I spill a little tea on it. I was eating a little pecan pie. For those of you who know me, I like pecan pie. I drop a little bit of that. There's some crumbs. I try to wash it. The stain doesn't come out. I also wear it down a little bit because I keep putting my arms up on the shelf or on my desk. And eventually he comes back in a month, and I give it to him. He looks at it, and he's like, wait a minute. This isn't mine. And I said, yeah, it's yours. Can't you see? It says FJ on it. It's got his initials. He initials all his shirts. FJ. He looks and he's like, yeah, it's FJ, it's mine, but this is not the state I gave it to you in, right? The value of this Polo sweatshirt when I gave it to you was 100%, was perfect. And yet you've ruined it, you've destroyed it. Why? Because you took it, and you took it from something that has this much value and you reduced it completely. That's facade. That is corruption. When God says corruption in the Quran, it can mean many things. But in a sense, it means the devaluation of something that has a lot of value or some value. Right? And we're doing this constantly. And it is going to occur always. Now, the worst type of corruption is the corruption that is overt, that you can see, that is plainly evident in front of your eyes, and that is focused on devaluing human beings. Right? That is probably the greatest crime that a human being can commit, is the devaluation of human life. And today, let's take a moment to remember those who've lost their lives in Syria, in Turkey, in other countries, particularly from the effects of this earthquake, who are suffering today. And remember that they're human beings just like us, and that the life that they hold has the same value as our life. There is no human life that does not have value. It has that value to it. Yet, you see, in our process in daily life, we've taken that value and we've caused it to come downward, all right? We've caused it to become devalued. And in doing so, we've dehumanized people. Dehumanization is our excuse for not treating people the way they should be treated. Just think about it. If you treat someone poorly, it's because you've automatically concluded in your mind that they are not as much of a human as you are. And that's very true. And unfortunately, the Quran points in very specific stories about certain very corrupt characters who've done this very thing. So, how many have heard of Fir'aun? Everyone knows Fir'aun, right? I mean, the worst despot in history, maybe. One of the worst despots in history. The way the Quran describes this man. So now the Quran gives an ayah that describes, and the beauty of the Quran is its subtle descriptions, how it sort of paints a picture for you. It says, إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. He says, Fir'aun exalted himself in the earth. He made himself arrogant, right? And that's what you think you're better than everyone. So he exalted himself in the earth, and he took people, and he relegated them to different castes, different systems, different people, different groups, and gave them a hierarchical position. Some were higher than others. That's what the ayah is saying. وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ. He says, the verse of the Quran, it says, he took people after separating them into different groups, giving them hierarchical positions, some higher than the other, giving them different statuses. He took one group and he oppressed them. He made them weak. One group, he made them weak. Look at the description of the Holy Quran. And this weakness that he imposed upon them, this oppression, this tyranny he imposed upon them, what type of tyranny was it? So he went and he killed the young boys, right? Because he was afraid that Moses, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, is going to come and overthrow him. He placed watchers everywhere. He enslaved them in the sense of using them as physical labor. But not only that, his enslavement of the Bani Israel, the tribe of Israel, was such that he enslaved their minds. These were people who were so oppressed, so crushed. Yes? Am I not loud enough? Usually my family says you're too loud. Is that better? Doesn't sound old yet, that's better. So, what did he do? Well, he took people and he basically crushed their identity, made them believe things that were not true, and even though they knew they were oppressed, it was hard to break out of that oppression. Why? Because it had been hammered into their psyches and their minds. The worst kind of oppression that is happening, physical oppression is there, it's in front of your eyes, but it's the mental oppression, the psychological oppression that is occurring, so much so that the Quran even gives you an example of this. And you have to really study the Quran to be able to see something like this. It says that, you know the story that when they escaped from Egypt, Pharaoh was chasing after them, they got to the sea, what happened? They thought they were stuck, Pharaoh was chasing them from behind, they don't know where to go, Musa alayhi salam strikes the water and it splits, no? Not only does it split, they get through, and when Pharaoh comes chasing behind them, convinces his soldiers to get into the sort of the floor of the river, the water comes crashing down, and he perishes, he dies. Meanwhile, Musa alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam, and all of the tribal members, they escape and have been saved. Now imagine, if you were to see something like that, what would you think? Death is right behind you. It's going to grab you. This tyrant who's been oppressing you for decades is behind you. And suddenly, the water splits in this miraculous event, and you come through. Will you believe? You'll believe, right? How many of you would believe? You'll believe. This is an event like no other. Yet what happened to them after? The Holy Quran describes that as they are sort of tarrying through the desert, having left Fir'aun dead, escaped by the miracle of God in front of their eyes, the Holy Quran describes they come upon a tribe and they see a tribe worshipping idols. So they come to Musa alayhi salam after having witnessed the miracle that just happened to them, and what do they say to him? اجعل لنا إلها كما لهم آلهة. The verse of the Quran describes that they come to Musa and they say, "Oh Musa, make for us some idols, some gods, just like these tribal people have idols of their own." Now God has just saved them. God just rescued them. Yet imagine the state of their minds, their psyches, how oppressed they were, that this is their state. That even now they cannot break free of that mental oppression. This is the world in which we live. This is humanity, right? This is the state of humanity. And oftentimes it's very overt. It's right in front of our faces. And when it is that, Islam's sort of admonishment to us is quite simple. And it describes sort of the issue of justice and equity in quite simple terms. There are two words in the Holy Quran that are used. One of those words is adala or adl. Right? Adl, when you translate it, it means justice. Right? Qist, on the other hand, is also translated to be justice, but really more equity than anything else, being equitable. But if you were to try to understand the significance of these two words that are used in the Holy Quran, you would see that there's slight difference between them. Adala, it means to put something in its rightful place. The minute you take something that belongs in one place and put it in the wrong place, misplace it, you have done injustice. You have done dhulm, which is the opposite of adala. Qist, on the other hand, it means equity. It means you have two people in front of you who you should treat equally, but you prefer one over the other. The opposite of qist is something called jawr. Jawr means you give unfair preference to one over the other. Whether that's in the fulfillment of their rights, whether it's in resources, the Holy Quran talks about this over and over. Over and over and over. All the time. And not only does it do so in this sort of very poignant way, but it points to you that don't sort of allow your whims to be controlling of you. And it says very clearly, فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا الْهَوَىٰ أَن تَعْدِلُوا. Don't allow your whims to steer you away from being just. Not only your whims, imagine today. If you were to see a piece of pecan pie over here on the table, all bets are off, and I will fight any one of you for it, okay? My desires will take over, and that's it. I'm a Southerner. You guys live in New York, so I don't know about that. I'm from North Carolina. We are Southern people. We like our pecan pie, all right? Our biscuits and pecan pie. So your whims can be that. Not only that, but the verse of the Quran, it says very clearly, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنْآنَ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. And Zuhair knows these ayahs better than me. That don't allow animosity against an enemy to steer you away or force you not to be just. أَعْدِلُوا وَأَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Be just. Why? Because that is closer to piety. Always be just. So I said to you that when it is apparent and in front of you, Islam's message is quite clear. Act to stop the injustice. Or if you cannot act for some reason, why? Because maybe there is a risk on you in some way, or really there's nothing in your power that you can do to change, then at least speak up. And if you cannot speak up, then at least deny it in your heart. Imagine. And I will come to that last part soon. And that will be what I will finish with. Either act, either speak after acting, or if you cannot act, definitely voice yourself. And also include in that you are never ever going to allow your heart to die when it comes to these things. You will never allow yourself to become insensitive to the injustice or what is happening in front of you. And that is the key. Why? Because we see through a filter. Our filters decide everything for us. You've heard of the mindset theory. How many people have heard of the mindset theory? Yeah? Mindsets are essentially our brain's filters. They tell us how to see the world. It gives us our worldview. It gives us significance to what is in front of us, and in a sense, sort of pushes us and steers us how to act. And there are three forms of mindsets that are particularly negative. They're not good. One is generalization. All right? How many of you drive to work? Most of you don't. You probably live here, right? That's a dumb question. Okay. It is New York. By the way, I took the Q70 in, Sheikh Facade was like, there's no way you'll survive on the subway. I sent him a picture of the subway. He's like, what are you doing? You're going to get kidnapped. I'm like, I'm from Toronto. I'm originally from Toronto. We know about subways. New York's not the only subway system in the world. So, regardless, I'm going to go back to my example. It's going to work, all right? It'll work. When you've been driving or taking the same road every single day to a destination, what happens? It becomes like autopilot, right? Sometimes I get up in the morning and I'll go to work, and I don't even know how I got there. Like I'm walking in, I'm like, how did I make it here? Those are some of the best days, by the way, right? Like those are the good days where you've not even expended even 1 ounce of energy driving to work. So you get there, and your mind is on autopilot. Why do we do this? Because it's efficient. The human body, the brain particularly, is extremely efficient. It wants to compartmentalize. It wants to ensure that if it can prevent wastage of energy, you'll do that. Particularly what? Attention. If it can prevent you from using energy on attentiveness, it will do so. Why? Because attentiveness takes energy, right? Now imagine, why would I tell you that? Double-edged sword. No? Totally a double-edged sword. Because on one end, being attentive is what is going to allow you to advance, to see the world, to cause change. On the other hand, what else will it do? The blunting of attentiveness due to sort of getting used to things, getting habituated to things, will cause you to become blind to some degree. All right? So you drive and you become habituated. And you start to generalize things. So one of the mindsets that is very negative is something called generalization, where you see something in front of you, you associate it with something else that you know about, and you automatically assume that what you know about that first thing that is familiar to you applies also to that other thing, that second thing. Does that make sense? That sounded really convoluted. Okay? Stereotyping counts for that. You don't try to examine or investigate or find out more. You just conclude that I already had this preconceived notion about something, and now this other thing that has come resembles it, so it must be like that picture that I've already developed inside of my mind. It's called generalization. The other thing is called deletion. All right? Deletion essentially is a mindset in which you see something in front of you that is potentially triggering, not in a psychological way, not in causing trauma or depression or one of those things or anxiety, triggering in the sense that it may conjure negative feelings inside of you, negative thoughts, or something that is displeasing to you. And what will you do? Do any of us like thinking about displeasure? How many of you like liver? Man, if I want to turn myself off to anything, I think about fried liver. In my childhood, I was forced to eat fried liver all the time. Also eaten in the deep south quite a bit. We like our liver down there. Not me, but anything that's displeasing, where do you want it? Out of your mind. You don't want it there. So what do? You delete it. You get rid of it. Or the third thing, you distort it. You distort it and you say, well, it doesn't actually taste like liver. It's going to taste like filet mignon. All right? Which it really doesn't. Okay? Chicken and waffles. Come on, guys. With a little maple syrup. I never thought I would mix sweet and salty like that. But you put maple syrup on fried chicken with waffles. Oh my God. Take me to Jannah now. Jannah better have an open buffet of chicken and waffles. Right? So, you see how your mind works. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because when oppression, when injustice, when ugliness is overt, it's easy, relatively speaking, to understand it, to know what you're going to do to it, to know how you would respond to it, if you are at least awake enough to see it, right? But what if you've become so apathetic that it doesn't even matter? What if you've become so insensitive to the world around you that now it's happening, and although you are a good person, you deny injustice, you decry any form of oppression or tyranny, you don't accept it, but you're sort of numb. You've become numb. And that, our mindset determines on a moment-by-moment basis, all right? We think one thing, and the world thinks another. I'll give you a personal example. I always think of myself as a pretty approachable guy, you know? I try to keep my head down, you know, and be humble, and try to smile, and try to be approachable in any way, shape, or form. And I had this preconceived notion about myself until one day I talked to this young woman in Dearborn. I was in Dearborn. And she's like, Sheikh, you're a bit intimidating. And I was like, what? No way. No way. Until I finally heard it from someone else. They're like, it's hard to come and approach you or talk to you. Now, I'm not saying that so that you feel intimidated. On the contrary, we should be approachable and we should be able to talk to each other. Anyone. Happily, smiling, and without any barriers. But I had this preconceived notion that was totally wrong. And it's not because of the smiling or because of my approachability or how humble I thought I was appearing to be. It's because of maybe the aura that I was giving off that looked arrogant in some way, right? Or that looked as if I know it and you don't know it, right? I'm doing it, I just don't know that I'm doing it. Or I'm just so careless about it or heedless about it that it's happening and I don't even know that it's happening. And that is very dangerous because overt oppression, overt injustice, overt evil can be dealt with in a simple manner in the sense that you know it's there. But when you cannot see it, when it's so dark and hidden from your eyes, dealing with it, remediating it becomes so difficult. So difficult. Requires a great deal of introspection. And requires that if you are thinking about the effects on other people, the difficulties they're suffering, then you have to put yourself in their shoes. No? There's a study that was done, particularly after the Me Too movement, after the Black Lives Matter movement, in which metadata analysis showed
that, and I can't even remember the exact details of the data itself, that although the world was suddenly awake, at least the United States, right, as to the rights of women, the rights of African American and Black American people, that in all honesty, those of us who are not black, those of us who are not women, don't really know what it means to suffer their cause, right? If I'm standing there and protesting, it's good. I'm trying to champion them, but am I living in their shoes such that I know what they're going through? No, I'm not. And nor do I have a right to claim that. That's not to say you shouldn't stand up for their rights, but you should recognize the fact that you don't live in their shoes. There's a really great story from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam, from Amir al-Mu'mineen, that one day he had gone to Basra. During his caliphate, he went to Basra, he had a governor there. And the governor was living in a big house. Imam Ali knocks on the door. The governor, who is the appointee of Imam Ali, who answers the door, he gets scared because he opens the door, Imam Ali is standing right there, and he says, "Oh, what are you doing here?" Imam Ali, he says, "I came to visit you." He calls him in. Imam Ali meets with him. The man asks, "Is there something wrong? Why have you come to visit me here in Basra?" Imam Ali says, "I heard and now verified that you have bought yourself a very opulent, a very rich, very wealthy, expensive house." He says, "Oh, my master, I paid for this out of halal money. I didn't misuse any money, I didn't misuse any funds, it's all halal, it's all proper, there's nothing prohibited in this." Imam Ali says, "I am not accusing you of that. That is not the point." He says, "However, you as the governor of this town, every subject who lives under your authority, every citizen of this place looks up to you. And although those of higher status, those who are rich themselves, affluent themselves, can come and knock at your door because they have comparable homes, comparable wealth, those who are the poorest of society will look on you and they will feel utterly disconnected. They will not be able to relate to you, nor will they be able to come to talk to you out of fear of intimidation, due to intimidation, or their perception of intimidation, even though you think you are a very humble and nice guy," right? Imagine. You have to lower yourself. So now the governor, he says, "Well, I take to heart your words. However, can you go visit my brother?" He says, "What's wrong with your brother?" He says, "He lives here. He's gone in the opposite direction. He's basically become a pauper. He's disavowed life. He doesn't work. He doesn't have clothes. He doesn't eat. He has a wife and children. He does nothing but pray all day long. He does nothing." Imam Ali goes to see the brother, knocks on the door. The man is living in a bare bones home. He's been worshipping. He's been praying in the corner. Imam Ali, he comes in. He sees him. He says, "What is this state I have found you in? That you're just praying all the time. You're not working. You're not earning a living. You're not supporting your family. You're not doing what you're supposed to do." The man says, "I'm worshipping God. I spend my time in prayer. I fast and I pray all the time." Imam Ali, he looks at him. He says, "Where did you learn to do all of this?" He says, "From you. You do this." He says, "How did you learn to live in this way, like a simple person with bare clothes and simplest of food?" He says, "I learned that from you. You eat nothing but dry bread. You have the simplest of clothes. You have 2 pairs of clothes." It was known that Imam Ali had 2 shirts in his life. Only 2 shirts. He says, "I learned that from you." Imam Ali says, "Although that's true, you are not in my position. I am the Imam. I am the Khalifa. I am the leader of this community, such that I have to be approachable by the poorest of the community. You don't. You should fulfill your obligation." Imagine, our Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, when people asked where he was, whenever they were looking for him, does anyone know where they used to find him? Almost always with Ashab al-Sufa. Ashab al-Sufa, you know the mosques over there in the east, they've got this little, in the entranceway, like a little dome almost, and it's like a overhanging. And that always is there. Why? Because it covers from the sun. In the Sufa itself, there were poor people who would live there, who would hide from the heat of the sun. And they will hide in the shade. You would find Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam sitting with them always. Imagine. Because if you cannot connect to them, then how will you know what you're going through, what they're going through? How will you feel for them? And in indeed, are we not at risk that if we, ourselves, live a comfortable life, which is allowed, it's not haram, if Allah has given to you, you thank and you appreciate and you live a comfortable life. No one's saying no. But recognize the fact that you become disconnected. It's almost inevitable that you're going to become disconnected because you have no way of relating to those who do not have what you have automatically, right? And you see that this is happening constantly, even when we have good intentions, let's say. Because the vast majority of people of the world maybe have some form of apathy in them, but they certainly also have good intention to change, to improve the world, to get rid of injustice, to get rid of tyranny and inequality of any sort, disparities of any sort. Yet, even in our good efforts, there are lots and lots of failures. All right? So let me give you a couple of examples. There are some epidemiological studies that were done, really conclusive stuff across the board, okay? Not just in one field, but because I'm in the health field, I'll give you some health examples. So what they wanted to do was increase the number of colonoscopies that people were undergoing, all right, due to colon cancer screening. So they wanted to encourage people to get colonoscopies. So they did this campaign where they had some public health messaging, giving out some details, giving out some statistics about people who get them, how preventative it is, how much it saves people from future incidences of colon cancer, etc. And indeed, there was an uptick in the number of people who were getting colonoscopies. There was an increase. It went from something like 70% or 60% to 80%, all right? But do you know that increase, do you know who it was, which group it was in? It was in the group of people who are already rich, who already have access to healthcare, who already can read and understand those data. It was not in the poor people who have no access to healthcare. In fact, their numbers went down. All right? So this was a good effort, right? The intention is there, is to do something good. But what did it do? It created a gap, a bigger gap. Same thing goes with smoking. You know, smoking, anti-smoking, or smoking cessation campaigns. Have you ever read about the details of this stuff? Read about it. They're really quite scary. Where they have these campaigns where you go out, you know, what are they called? The truth campaigns. Have you seen those on TV? Truth campaign. And they've got a whole bunch of stuff that comes out from the public health service that stops smoking, it causes lung cancer, it does this, it does that. And indeed, we see that fewer people are smoking. Fewer people are smoking. Do you know who they are? Educated, college educated, middle upper class Americans are the ones who are not smoking. You know who's still smoking a lot? Lower SES, poorer people are still smoking a lot. Do you want to know why? They can't relate to the public health messaging. It makes no sense to them. Not only that, but the thing that's overt and kind of poor is that, do you know where all tobacco sales are occurring, most of them? In poor neighborhoods, not rich neighborhoods. Go up to Bel Air in Los Angeles, right? What's the rich area in New York? Penthouse, west of Central Park, no? That's expensive, is it? Any tobacco sales happening there? No. Where are you going to find a little mom and pop grocery store where they sell cheap cigarettes? In the poor neighborhoods, right? Think about it. So you're trying to be, this is what you call the efficiency equality paradox, or equity. Efficiency equity paradox. You're trying to be efficient, you're trying to reduce health burdens, disease burden, but at the same time, what's happening? As an unwanted consequence, you're increasing the disparity between those who are improving and getting better and benefiting and those who are not. You're just making a bigger gap. Just from good intention. The intention is good, but the lack of connection, the lack of awareness, the lack of really relating to what these people are going through is causing these negative side effects. And it's happening a lot, all right? So you see sort of what humanity is going through. And why do we bring this up? Well, because we're all stuck here on Earth together, right? And is any one of us absolved of responsibility? We're not absolved of responsibility. Because it's not just about wealth and money. My dear brothers and sisters, it's not about how much money you give. If you have $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, and you give out $1,000 check, it's a good deed. It's generous. You should do it. But don't stop there, because that act is very easy. poverty is a lot more than just lack of resources. There's something called the Multidimensional Poverty Index. I don't know how many have heard of this, all right? The Multidimensional Poverty Index was developed basically by the United Nations and the World Health Organization, the World Bank, in conjunction with the World Bank, and basically says that poverty is not just about income and material wealth. It's about other things as well. Educational attainment, access to education, clean drinking water, sanitation. All these things. And if you include all these factors into the measurement of who is poor and who is not, 60% of the world is considered to be poor. That's staggering. That's really, really staggering. It's painful. And it's not to do with money and wealth. It's to do with everything. Education. It's strange because I don't know how many of you know this story. And I go back to Islam, and the beauty of Islam is that Islam teaches us in general, very universal ways. That's why you have to tap into its message to pull out these nuggets. Does Islam talk about efficiency, equality? No, it doesn't. Does it talk about other things, multi-dimensional poverty index? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mention it overtly. But does it actually speak to it, to the conditions that exist? It does. I'll give you one example. Once Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sitting in the mosque. People were surrounding him there. They were talking to him. A lady walks in. She says, Ya Rasulullah, I want to get married. Can you get me married to someone? He says, sure. He asks over there, who would marry this woman? Who would marry? I wish it was that easy these days, right? Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. So she walks in. She says, I'd like to get married. Rasulullah, he looks at the man and he says, who will marry her? Nobody answers. Now, the hadith doesn't say like what she looked like, or anything. It doesn't. It just says a woman walked in. She wanted to get married. Finally, one man stands up. He says, "Oh Prophet, I will marry her." So Rasulullah, he says, "What will you give to her in the dowry?" Because in Islam, when you marry, a man has to give dowry, right? And that dowry is something that the woman, it becomes her property, but it is a source of empowerment to her. So the poor man, he looks at Rasulullah. He says, "I have nothing. I'm poor. I have nothing. I have basically no assets, no home, no nothing. I'm a poor man." Rasulullah, he says, "What do you know?" He says, "I know the Quran. I know how to read the Quran and understand the Quran." He says, "Then if she accepts your dowry to her, is that you will teach her Quran. Do you accept?" He asked the lady. The lady says, "Yes, I accept. I accept." We don't think this way, right? Because again, the measure of someone's assets, their affluence, their, dare I say, security in life is how much wealth they have. Yet today, if I have a neighbor and I give them $100, that $100 is going to run out eventually. But if I educate them, doesn't that last longer? No? Surely it does. It's just, what's the problem here? It's that giving that $100 is much easier than me going and educating them. That's why Islam emphasizes knowledge and understanding and giving things of their proper right. Empowerment of individuals. Empowerment of individuals. The Holy Quran describes that يَسْأَلُونَكَ وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى. O Prophet, the people come and ask, what should we do about the orphans? What should we do about the orphans? قُلْ إِصْلَاحٌ لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ. Tell them, O Muhammad, that do good to them. It doesn't say give them money. It doesn't say give them charity in terms of dollar bills. It says do good to them. And not only then that, but if you bring them into your communities, then they are your brothers. How do you treat your own brother? By giving him a dollar bill? No, by ensuring that his life is on the right path. That he is himself sustainable. He is himself empowered. He is himself completely committed to the improvement of his own well-being. Because in the end, you can do only so much. But you can empower him. You can help him. Not only that, but recognizing that whatever God has given to you has a value. I mentioned to you facade, corruption. that when things get corrupt, it's because their value has been destroyed or deteriorated. In this case, imagine the mind of a human being, how much value it has, and how much corruption has destroyed the value of that mind, the potential of that mind. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. The Holy Quran, it describes, and I'm an environmental scientist, I do environmental justice work and climate change work. I'm a big climate change guy. Most of my work right now is climate change and environmental justice. And this one ayah describes perfectly environmental justice, equity, and resource management, sustainability. I saw the word sustainability here up on the screen a while ago. Sustainability. The Holy Quran, it describes that there are many different gardens God has made, and of them you get fruits. He says, eat of it. Kulu min thamarihi. Eat of it. And he says, Kulu min thamarihi idha athmar. وآتوا حقه يوم حصاده ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين. He says, the day the fruit comes out, eat of it. You're allowed. Fulfill your basic need, eat, consume. Imagine this in a broader sense. God gives you something, consume it. He gives you food, eat it. He gives you healthcare system, utilize it. He gives you education, seek it. Go and do all of those things. But what does he say in addition? وَآتُوا حَقَّهُ يَوْمَ حَصَادِهِ. Ensure that when you take it, fulfill its right on you. That food has a right on you. Meaning what? وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. Don't be extravagant. Meaning what? Meaning you hoarded it all for yourself, you consumed like a locust, and what happened? You forgot about the person next to you. This is not just the food, my dears. It's your education. It's your opportunity to education. It's your opportunity for career. It's all of those things. Quran is saying it. It's just not saying it in that blatant, in that open, overt way. It's saying recognize the right of that gift that God gave to you. And that gift has the right that you should share it. The minute you used it, you should share it. It has to be. That's why even education is one of those things. I'll finish with two things. I'm doing good, right? I got the thumbs up. Forget it. And the food's in the back also. What do we have for dinner tonight? You know, I always plan it out. I plan it out. That I look and I'm like, what do I have to look forward to? So. Melanie, what do we got? Chicken parm. Is that like authentic Italian style? Yeah?
Just for you.
Well, I am like 1/10 Italian or something. No. I eat like it though. So, education is extremely important. Extremely important. How many of you have heard of Paulo Freire? I mentioned him quite a bit. Paulo Freire, Brazilian activist, okay, from the 60s. I'm not sort of giving credence to what he said. There's a lot of stuff I don't agree with. Nor am I sort of saying that everything he said is right. But he did describe one thing. In a time in Brazil, when the rich classes, the upper classes, were getting education, the poorer classes were being deprived of education. All right? And not only were they being deprived, but when they did get education, that education was called sort of, can't remember, banking education. I think that's what he referred to it, if I remember correctly. Which means what? Meaning, when you go to the bank, they give you the money, you take the money, you go. That's it. There's nothing else. In this case, he said, the educational system for poor Brazilians is not serving their needs. Why? Because it's just talking to them. It's shoving information down their throat. It's not actually engaging in a dialogue. He said, the only way you can fight oppression, the only way all of you can fight oppression, the teacher and the student, is if they get into a dialogue together. All right? In that you are teaching the student that they are as much a teacher in the process as they are a student. What does that mean? It means that once they get the information, they have to be able to share that information and critically discuss it and describe it such that you can feel the conviction in them. That is the only way to deal with oppression. Think about it. Think about the tribe of Bani Israel and Pharaoh. Mindlessness, lack of strength. The Muslim Ummah is no different from this, are we not? We have many in our communities who think this way, who don't understand the power of education, who understand the significance of individual empowerment, right? And that's what we cannot be apathetic about. because that is not seldom seen. Seldom seen. Overt oppression, you see it. It's there in front of you. You can recognize it. You can identify it. It's there. You know maybe what to do. But when it's so latent, it's so hidden that if you don't pay attention, it's occurring, it becomes systemic. And we see things that are systemic here, right? Systemic abuses, systemic racism, systemic prejudice. It occurs everywhere in the world. Why does it occur? Because of human apathy. Because even sometimes when we try to do the right thing, we don't end up doing the right thing. We end up failing miserably, right? Or we end up not achieving the goals the way we want. And yet the Holy Quran, it speaks in very beautiful general terms, all right? And I ask of you that don't go searching for specifics. Like someone asked me about environmental justice. Is environmental justice in the Holy Quran? No, it's not. The term environmental justice is not used in the Quran. But the Holy Quran talks about justice as an umbrella concept. That applies to everything. It doesn't just apply to you going and stealing from somebody, or God forbid, taking the rights of somebody. It has to do with everything. It has to do with the fact that you're consuming so much fossil fuel and spewing out CO2. Here's the environmental scientist in me, right? I also work for the Environmental Protection Agency, so that's my role. So imagine the effects of all of that. It speaks so beautifully. So let me leave you with this last story, which is a phenomenal story, okay? In the early days, when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I don't know about you, but I want some pecan pie. Sheikhna, no, donuts don't cut, man.
I got you, don't worry.
Go down, you'll go get it too. No, don't get it, I'm just kidding. I don't like New York pecan pie. Why are you gasping? Come to North Carolina, you know what I'm talking about. The South. Okay, so Prophet Muhammad, in the early days, you can't beat Southern charm though. You know, when I went to North Carolina, everyone was like, how are you moving down there? It's red state. Southern people are the best people in the world. They're so charming, so hospitable, so kind. You almost can't feel the racism in them. It's not. That is a very small number of people who are extreme. The vast majority are welcoming, kind, and they want us to be citizens of this country. We have to do it ourselves, right? Okay, so finally onto the story, which I have stopped like 3 times already. So Prophet Muhammad is in Mecca in those early days, before his migration to Medina. People would come from Medina to Mecca for trade, for different purposes. One of those men was a man named Al-As'ad ibn Zurara. Al-As'ad ibn Zurara was one from the big tribes of Medina. He had come to Mecca for some trade or for some business, something that he had to do. He finished it, and in the meantime, it is reported that he heard someone say, oh, there's a man from the tribe of Quraysh who's proclaiming to be a prophet of God, messenger, and that he has brought a religion, and he is basically denouncing our idols and etc., putting our sort of traditions that they are false, that they are not correct. He says, who is he? So they tell As'ad ibn Zurara about Rasulullah and what he is doing. He says, they told me immediately that don't listen to him, he will bewitch you. If you hear him speaking, don't listen. So As'ad ibn Zurara, he describes that I was about to leave to go back to Medina. In those days, people still circumambulated the Kaaba, even though they were pagans, they were idol worshippers. He says, as I'm walking, I see that man Muhammad preaching. He's preaching in the courtyard, and I'm about to leave, and I'm trying very hard not to listen to him. But in the end, something compelled me to listen. And when I heard him, it is related that Rasulullah was quoting a verse of the Quran. As'ad ibn Zurara wanted to know what was Islam. And that was the thought that he said, in my mind, it sort of piqued my interest that what is this religion that this man Muhammad is talking about, all right? So now, he says, as I'm walking, I hear Muhammad quoting verses from his holy book, saying, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ أَلَّا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ مِنْ إِمْلَاقٍ نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. The verse says, it's long, bear with me. The The verse says, let me tell you, O Muhammad, tell them all the things that God has prohibited. You want to know what is religion? Find out what is religion, what is Islam, by knowing what is prohibited in these 3 verses that I'm going to tell you. 1, don't do shirk, don't associate with God. And وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, make sure you do good to your parents. Wow. Imagine that right after association with God comes what? Goodness to the parents. If there's any message about how high the status of a parent is, that's right there. Go home and call your parents tonight, yeah? Say thank you. On top of that, what? وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ مِنْ إِمْلَاقٍ نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. Do not kill your children. Meaning, don't be afraid that your resources are so limited that you will go and kill your children. Allah says, we will bestow upon you, we will give you, and we will give them, and we will take care of them. And if you consider in a general sense that God is saying, don't worry about sustenance, don't be extreme in your behavior, God will provide. Trust in God. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. Do not engage in acts that are abominable, that are detestable. Fawahish or fahisha is an abominable act. It's an act that is considered ugly and unnatural. Do not engage in unnatural acts, abominable acts, whether they are in front of people or whether you are doing them secretly. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. Do not kill a self that is sacred, that is preserved, that Allah has preserved its life, except when truth demands it. Alright? Except when truth demands it. ذَلِكُمْ وَصَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. This is what God has directed you to. Why? So that you can ponder and think. I said to you awareness, right? Ponderance means you're aware. You have to be aware. He doesn't stop. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ. Do not come close or try to touch the wealth of an orphan. Don't take the money of an orphan. They have no guardians. They have no one to safeguard them, protect them. Don't take that money until they become strong themselves. Or if it is to help them, to better their position somehow or the other. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Make sure that when you deal with people, make the balance and the measures just. Don't cheat people. Look at how the Quran is describing so generally, but this applies to everything. Don't cheat people, even one little dot. Now, all of this, it's pretty overbearing, right? All these things that he's telling us to do, seems pretty heavy. In the middle of these 2 verses, he says, لَا نُكَلِّفُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. He says, don't worry, we will not put a burden on you more than you can bear. These things we're telling you to do is not more than you can bear. It is there. You can do it. وَإِذَا قُلْتُمْ فَعْدِلُوا وَلَوْ كَانَ ذَا قُرْبَى. If you speak and bear witness to something, then make sure you speak the truth, even if it means to go against your own family. Stay on the side of truth. Even if it is against your own family. وَبِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ أَوْفُوا. If you have made a covenant with God, make sure you fulfill it. ذَلِكُمْ وَصَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. Then he repeats the same thing. He says, this is what we have directed you to do. Why? So you can remind yourselves. Don't become apathetic. Don't forget. Don't become heedless. Ponder. Don't become heedless. And in the last ayah, وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ. This is the Sirat al-Mustaqim you've been asking for. We say every day, right? اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ, and then take us to the straight path. He says, this is the Sirat al-Mustaqim that I'm pointing to. It's in the Quran. He says, so follow it and don't follow all those other paths. Why? Because it will divide you all up. فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ ذَلِكُمْ وَصَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. This is his directive to you. Why? So you can be fearful, be pious. These last 3 words, تَعْقِلُونَ تَذَكَّرُونَ تَتَّقُونَ, all of them mean what? It means awareness, fighting apathy, ponderance, and action. No? That's our cause. قُلْ Quran just said it in 3 verses and basically covered everything in 3 verses. It's applicable to environmental justice, to prejudice, to racism, to systemic disenfranchisement, to anything. It's applicable. It's just we have to pay attention to what it's saying. We have to open our hearts. And if I say one last thing, do not let your hearts die. Death of the heart is the worst calamity. We don't want to be of those whose hearts have fallen asleep and worse have died, such that it happens in front of us and we could care less. We do not want to be of those. We want to be active. We want to engage. And even if it does not come to our door seeking need, we want to go out and find those who are needy and actively try to help them and not wait for them to come to us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. Let's read a dua quickly. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك بحق محمد وآل محمد عليك صل على محمد وآل محمد واجعل النور في بصري والبصيرة في ديني واليقين في قلبي والإخلاص في عملي والسلامة في نفسي والسعة في رزقي والشكر لك أبدا ما أبقيتني وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد.